When an HOA queen hijacks my private lake for her outrageous wedding without asking, I push back. But she's got forged permits, county connections, and an army of drunk guests. What follows? Chaos, cops, viral fame, and a takedown that no one saw coming. This isn't just a feud, it's war. I never planned on becoming a neighborhood legend. All I ever wanted was peace, quiet, and a damn good view of the water while drinking my morning coffee. 6 years ago, I bought a chunk of land just outside a sprawling suburb in Virginia. 5 acres of trees, hills, and my own private lake that caught the morning sun like glass. I built the house myself, mostly. Nothing fancy, just sturdy, smart, and a bit off the grid. No HOA. That was the deal breaker. I'd had enough of petty lawn citations and pastel fence codes in my last life. Out here, it was just me, the frogs, and a loyal mutt named Rocket who'd never ratted me out once. The lake was my pride, not huge but deep and still, framed with pine and oak with a little dock I'd nailed together one muggy June. I stocked it with base, kept the shoreline trimmed just enough to sit with a beer or a book, and built a fire pit nearby. Friends came out once in a while, fishing, grilling, tossing cornhole bags like suburban warriors. But mostly it was my sanctuary. Private, posted with no trespassing signs I made from old cedar planks for that rustic charm that also said, "Try me." The neighborhood wasn't far, technically. About a 10-minute drive from the main road brought you to the first cookie-cutter homes of Rosefield Commons, a place that looked like it had been pressed out of a plastic mold. Vinyl siding, identical hedges, American flags on every porch like they'd been issued. Rosefield Commons had an HOA, and at the center of that HOA was Karen Blake. I'd heard the stories. Ex-military wife, ex-mayor's assistant, full-time enforcer of rules that barely applied to her own property. She was the kind of woman who could weaponize a clipboard and a frown. Still, our paths didn't cross much. She lived near the edge of Rosefield, close enough to see my tree line from her upstairs window, I suppose, but far enough not to matter. Or so I thought. About a week ago, I got a thick envelope in my mailbox, no stamp, just tucked in by hand. The envelope was cream-colored, high quality, like something you'd get from a wedding planner trying too hard. Inside was an invitation printed in metallic gold cursive. The Honorable Karen Blake and Mr. Charles Henley request the pleasure of your company at their union to be held at Roseview Lake Saturday at 4 in the afternoon. There were glossy photos tucked behind the invite. The main one, framed like a goddamn real estate brochure, was my lake, my dock, my shoreline, my trees. The picture must have been taken from the bluff near my northern fence line. At first I thought it was a mistake, maybe a stock image, maybe the printer messed up. Then I saw the second photo, Karen and Charles, her fiancé, standing on my dock, smiling like politicians. She wore a sundress, he had boat shoes, and that sunburned smugness that comes with inherited wealth and 3 failed startups. In the background, my grill cover was halfway open. I stared at it for a long time. Rocket tilted his head beside me like he wasn't sure if I was going to laugh or scream. I didn't do either. That evening, I called the number on the RSVP card. Karen answered on the first ring. "Joshua," she chirped, like we were old friends who shared lemon bars and trauma. "So glad you got the invite. Charles and I are thrilled." I let that hang. "Karen," I said slowly, "that's my lake." She tittered. "Well, technically, it's adjacent to Rosefield." "No, not technically, not adjacent. It's on my deed, surrounded by my fences, with my ass paying the property taxes." "Oh, come now," she said, sugar turning sour. "Don't be territorial. It's just a wedding. You'll hardly notice us, it's one afternoon." "You didn't ask," she sniffed. "We assumed you'd be reasonable." I hung up before my blood pressure set off the smoke alarm. The next morning, I drove into town and double-checked with the county records office. My land hadn't changed shape overnight. The lake was still mine. No easement, no shared access, no HOA jurisdiction. Just a 5-acre stamp of freedom with my name burned on it in ink and sweat. I was still staring at the map when the clerk raised an eyebrow and said, "You got a problem with Rosefield?" "Not yet," I said, "but I've got a feeling one's been RSVP'd." I don't scare easy, but the next 48 hours had me checking my cameras more than usual. I figured the invitation incident was the peak of Karen's delusion. Maybe she'd back down after I made it clear her wedding wasn't happening on my land. I gave her the benefit of the doubt, which in hindsight was like handing a raccoon your car keys and hoping for a safe ride. On Monday, I woke up early, brewed my coffee, and walked the property line with Rocket. The lake shimmered calm as ever, the dock still intact. But when I made it to the north side, I stopped cold. Someone had hammered a temporary post into the ground just inside my fence with a laminated sign attached. Future site of Rosefield Commons Community Wedding Pavilion, private event access only. Below that was a logo, HOA approved, with a little gold dove. It was bolted through one of my cedar posts. I didn't even swear. I just stood there steaming while Rocket sniffed the base like it might explode. By mid-morning, a flatbed truck rumbled up the service road near the western trailhead. I was standing near my workshed when I saw it. 2 guys in polos and reflective vests hopped out and started unloading lattice panels, floral stands, and most ridiculously, a fake wrought iron archway. One of them had the gall to wave. "You boys lost?" I called out. "Nope," one replied cheerfully. "We're setting up for the Blake Henley wedding." "You're on private land." He pulled a clipboard from the cab, walked over like this was a routine misunderstanding. "We've got the location listed right here. Says access approved by Karen Blake and the HOA board. Temporary use for community event code 79B. "Karen Blake doesn't own this land," I said flatly. "And the HOA has no jurisdiction outside Rosefield's internal lots." He gave a slow blink, like maybe I was speaking Greek. "Buddy," I said, stepping forward, "this lake and everything around it is mine. You are trespassing, and if you don't pack up and leave in the next 10 minutes, I'm calling the sheriff." He glanced back at his coworker, then at the clipboard again. "Look, we were just told to set up," I pointed. "Back the truck out, now." They left. No apology, but at least they didn't argue. I called Karen again. Voicemail. Left a short message. "Next time you send people to invade my land, send a lawyer with them." Then I called my own. My attorney, Martin Ramos, was a quiet bulldog of a man who only spoke when facts were involved. He confirmed what I already knew. My deed was clean, my property line absolute, and any suggestion that a public easement existed was laughable. But then he said, "I just pulled a municipal record from last week. Karen filed for a temporary land use permit with the county." "Under what authority?" "She claimed the lake is part of shared community access under historic usage easement." I had to sit down. "She submitted a map," Martin continued, "showing an access trail that cuts across your lot from the northeast corner. It looks like it was redrawn recently. I'm requesting the original overlays." "She forged a public access path?" "Looks that way." My voice cracked from laughing. "Did they approve it?" "Pending, but they scheduled the event date assuming no disputes." "I'm disputing." I figured. We spent the rest of the day drafting a formal objection, attaching deed copies, old surveys, aerial maps, and a cease and desist letter with enough legal bite to scare most people into hiding under a porch. That evening, I took my own steps. I pulled my truck around and set up a line of private property, no public access. Trespassers will be prosecuted signs at every visible approach. I even bought a few reflective ones just for flair. Then I walked down to the dock, popped a lawn chair open, and streamed a video for TikTok. "Hey folks," I said, camera steady, rocket panting beside me. "Some of you might know me as the guy with the lake. Well, turns out someone tried to hijack my property for their dream wedding. That's right. Our local HOA queen thinks she can redefine land ownership. So here's a fun fact. This dock, this lake, that fire pit, and that little heron over there, they all belong to one person. Me." I pointed the camera toward the future pavilion sign. "See that? That wasn't mine. That's what we call trespassing. Stay tuned." I posted it before dinner. By midnight, it had over 10,000 views. The comments were glorious. The wedding day was set for Saturday. By Friday morning, it looked like a traveling carnival had vomited pastel chaos across my property line. Despite the cease and desist letter, despite my very public objection, Karen doubled down like she was auditioning for a reality show called Bridezilla Armed and Entitled. Friday started at dawn. I walked out onto my porch with a cup of coffee and nearly dropped it. A convoy of vans was crawling down the fire trail that bordered my east fence. Florists, caterers, a string quartet van, and one ominous black SUV with tinted windows. By the time I got to the lake, they were already halfway through unloading a wedding arch the size of a boat dock. Some guy in a vest was barking orders into a headset like he was directing a military operation. I approached calmly, rocket at my heel. "Let me guess," I said, hands in my pockets. "Still no permits?" One of the crew turned around, startled. He held a clipboard and tried to put on a diplomatic smile. "Sir, we're just here to follow the event schedule. The client, Mrs. Blake, assured us this location is under her jurisdiction." "Is that so?" I asked. "Because that spot where you're building the bar, that's my septic field." He went pale. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Not because I needed more content for the internet, though it didn't hurt, but because I had a hunch things were about to get ugly. I called the local police, explained the situation again. "This is private property," I said. "I've issued legal objections. They're trespassing and setting up for an unlicensed event." To my surprise, 2 patrol cars showed up within the hour. The officers were calm, professional. I showed them my deed, the cease and desist, the county survey, even the aerial drone footage from last summer where the lake sat peacefully undisturbed. But then Karen arrived. She emerged from the black SUV like she was stepping onto a red carpet, dress bag in hand, hair already in curlers, eyes hidden behind oversized sunglasses. Her fiancé, Charles, trailed behind her, looking less like a groom and more like a hostage. The second she saw the cops, she snapped into action. "Officers," she said, striding forward, "this is a misunderstanding. The wedding is permitted. We have county approval, and the HOA board voted unanimously to grant use of this space for the community." "Ma'am," one of the officers replied, "this land isn't part of your HOA. The property owner has documentation that it's private, independent, and not subject to your board." She waved a manicured hand. "That's not how community access works. This lake has been visually accessible for over a decade. We have precedent. It's a shared vista, an emotional landmark." I coughed, loudly. The other officer turned to me. "Sir, do you want them removed now?" Before I could answer, Karen jumped in. "You can't remove us. We have guests arriving in 2 hours. My makeup artist is already on site." "I want them gone," I said. "Now." But then something interesting happened. One of the other vendors, some poor teenage guy hauling folding chairs, recognized me from my TikTok videos. "Wait," he whispered to another crew member. "This is the guy from the lake wedding drama. Dude, this is his place." Word spread fast. Within minutes, half the workers had either stopped what they were doing or were recording footage of their own. One caterer walked up to me and apologized, then packed his van. Karen was still arguing with the cops when the first bus of guests pulled up. Yep, an actual bus. Dressed to the nines, champagne flutes in hand, they disembarked like this was some Napa Valley vineyard retreat. And then the shouting started. One of the officers told a group of guests they'd have to leave. One guy, already tipsy, told the officer to relax, it's a wedding, not a raid. That earned him a polite but firm hand on the shoulder. He shoved it off. That turned into a warning, which he ignored. Within seconds, someone tripped over a string of lights. Another guest pushed past one of the police officers and slipped in the mud by the dock. Then two of them started yelling about police overreach, filming close to one officer's face. Rocket started barking. The string quartet stopped playing. One of the groomsmen, clearly already drunk, grabbed a folding chair and raised it like he was in a WWE ring. I moved fast, got Rocket inside, locked the doors, and watched from my front window as the situation collapsed in real time. By the time backup arrived, 3 guests were in cuffs. Karen was screaming something about sovereign event zones, and Charles, the would-be groom, was nowhere to be found. The lake, as always, stayed calm. I don't know what I expected the morning after the wedding melee to look like, but I definitely wasn't expecting a hangover brunch tent still standing on my dock. The sky was gray, the ground was soggy from a light overnight rain, and someone had left behind a half-eaten wedding cake shaped like a swan with its head missing. Fitting. The police had cleared out the night before, taking with them 3 belligerent guests and the remains of Karen's dignity. But the damage was done. Literally. My shoreline was torn up with tire tracks. There were broken champagne flutes scattered in the grass, and the decorative arch someone had dragged into the shallows had collapsed into a sad heap of tulle and rotting flowers. I took photos of everything, wide shots, close-ups, drone footage. I didn't just want compensation, I wanted a legal reckoning. Martin, my lawyer, was already prepping a civil case. We had more than enough to sue for trespassing, property damage, and unauthorized commercial use of private land. And that was before I added the emotional distress from having to see Karen in full bridal regalia shrieking at a police officer. But that was just my angle. The rest of the community, they had their own. By Monday, the videos had gone viral. Not just the ones I posted, but ones from guests, vendors, and neighbors who watched the madness unfold from their backyard lawn chairs. Someone had even edited together a compilation set to dramatic classical music, slow-motion shots of champagne flying, the groom disappearing behind a tree line, and Karen being escorted toward the road while shouting, "You're destroying my special day." Within days, local media caught wind. Suburban wedding ends in arrests and legal firestorm. Read one headline. Another simply called it, Karen's Lake Gate. The public pressure was swift and relentless. The HOA board, clearly in panic mode, convened an emergency meeting. I didn't attend, I wasn't a member, but I received 4 different text messages from residents who were, all saying the same thing. Karen tried to claim the entire fiasco was a targeted smear campaign. One board member asked her point-blank why she'd filed an event permit on land she didn't own. She apparently responded, "It's not about ownership, it's about community vision." That didn't land well. That same evening, I got a knock at my door. It was Officer Morgan, the younger of the 2 from the wedding, holding a clipboard and looking uncomfortably apologetic. "Evening, Mr. Hudson. Just wanted to let you know the county is formally investigating the permit filings from Mrs. Blake. There's suspicion of document manipulation." "Suspicion?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "We're being polite." He handed me a copy of the incident report and said that several of the guests had filed statements blaming Karen for misrepresenting the location. The kicker? Even the wedding planner had sent in a written complaint. She'd been told the event would be held near community water with HOA consent. Karen never mentioned it was someone else's private lake until the sheriff showed up. Turns out, Charles, Karen's almost husband, had been contacted by his firm's legal department. Apparently, he hadn't been too pleased to find out he was almost married on trespassed land in full view of 20 viral cameras. According to Morgan, Charles wasn't pressing charges, but he had cut off all contact with Karen and left town the night of the wedding. By Thursday, I received official notice. Karen Blake was being charged with multiple misdemeanors, including trespassing, disorderly conduct, and filing a fraudulent land use application. My lawsuit would follow soon after. And yet somehow she still wasn't done. On Friday morning, I woke up to find a stack of papers taped to my mailbox. HOA letterhead. A formal grievance against me for disrupting a community event, intimidating guests, and damaging the spirit of neighborhood harmony. I stood there reading it, coffee in one hand, the other pinching the bridge of my nose. She was trying to play offense. That's when I realized she wasn't just crazy. She was strategic. She knew the ship was sinking and she was going to scream fire at everyone else before anyone could point at her holding the matches. I walked back inside, scanned the grievance, and forwarded it to Martin. His response came 10 minutes later. Let her try. We're going scorched earth. It's funny how fast people change sides when the pitchforks point in a new direction. 2 weeks ago, Karen Blake was the queen of HOA meetings, sharp, polished, terrifying. Now her name was a punchline in neighborhood group chats and viral compilations with titles like Karen's Big Day, in Court. I didn't get much time to enjoy the shift in public opinion, though, because the legal storm was just beginning. Martin and I filed the civil suit officially. Trespassing, property damage, fraudulent use of public permits, emotional distress. The complaint was nearly 30 pages long, and it read like the screenplay to a legal thriller, only with more folding chairs and floral centerpieces. The morning we filed, Martin emailed me. By the time we're done, she'll wish she'd just rented a vineyard. Meanwhile, Karen had gone quiet. No more emails, no visits, no new signs. Her social media vanished. I half expected her to flee the state, or change her name and show up on some HGTV wedding special under community ceremony enthusiast. But silence from someone like Karen is never peace. It's strategy. On Monday, Martin called. She's fighting back. Of course she is, I muttered. How? She filed a countersuit. I nearly dropped my phone. On what planet? She's claiming defamation, digital harassment, and emotional trauma caused by your online campaign. She means my TikTok videos? And the YouTube edits, the memes, the drone footage compilation. I didn't make the memes. She claims you fostered an environment of targeted public ridicule. Well, I said, if the shoe fits. Martin didn't laugh. We're going to file a motion to dismiss. It's a weak claim, but it'll drag this out. She's trying to outlast you. I wasn't worried. I had time and truth and about 60,000 followers who now referred to me as Lake Guy. But the real turning point wasn't legal. It was local. One of the HOA board members, a quiet guy named Frank who worked in IT and rarely spoke during meetings, reached out to me through email. Subject line, confidential, HOA documents. The message was short. You should see what she submitted to the board to justify the wedding. I didn't vote yes. I think you'll want this. Attached were 3 PDFs, internal emails between Karen and other board members, a fake event usage map she'd mocked up in Photoshop, and a memo from her claiming she had verbal approval from the landowner, me. I forwarded them to Martin within seconds. This is gold, he replied. She committed perjury in civil filings. And that memo? That's proof of intent to deceive. At that point, the lawsuit transformed from a civil property dispute to something far messier. The county launched an investigation into Karen's entire term on the HOA. They found several questionable documents, event permits, citations against homeowners that were never actually voted on, fines that went straight to a discretionary account. She wasn't just bold, she was corrupt. Then came the kicker. Martin sent me a link to a newly filed public record. Karen Blake was officially being indicted for filing fraudulent municipal documents and misuse of HOA funds. Not just a slap on the wrist, felony charges. I stared at the screen for a long while. Part of me was stunned. Part of me wasn't surprised at all. The next day, I got another letter taped to my mailbox, but this time it wasn't a grievance. It was a handwritten apology from Frank. He thanked me for standing up, said a few others had been afraid to speak even as they watched Karen take control of the HOA like it was her personal kingdom. He said things were finally changing. That night I posted one last video. Just me on the dock, beer in hand. No rants today, I said. Just peace and the sound of frogs. I raised the bottle to the camera. To quiet waters and loud justice. I didn't think Karen would ever go down quietly. That wasn't in her DNA, but even I was surprised by how quickly everything unraveled once the real investigations kicked in. Turns out, when someone's entire kingdom is built on fake maps, altered documents, and gaslighting an entire community, the collapse isn't slow, it's spectacular. The court hearing for my civil suit was set for the following month, but Karen wouldn't make it that far as the queen of the HOA. By the second week after the wedding debacle, a formal vote was held among the Rosefield Commons board members. For the first time in her reign, they met without her. I wasn't there, of course, still not a member, thank God. But I got live updates from Frank. It wasn't even close. 5-1. Karen was officially removed from her position as HOA president pending legal proceedings. Her resignation email leaked within hours. It was unhinged, dramatic, and somehow managed to quote both Shakespeare and Oprah. She accused the board of betrayal, the residents of ingratitude, and me, personally, of orchestrating a sustained campaign of character assassination through digital manipulation and psychological warfare. I almost had that embroidered on a throw pillow. But the real consequences came through the county court. Martin and I appeared with all the documentation. Deed records, timestamps from the surveillance footage, screen captures of her forged emails and fake maps. Karen's lawyer tried to argue that community traditions had granted her implied access to the lake. The judge didn't even blink. Tradition, he said, does not overrule private property law. Her defense melted faster than an ice sculpture in July. The judge ruled in my favor on all counts. She was ordered to pay damages for trespassing, compensate me for the cleanup and landscape restoration, and cover my legal fees. The amount wasn't life-changing, but it was enough to make a dent in whatever was left of her designer wardrobe budget. But that wasn't the worst part for her. A week later, I got a call from a local journalist, someone who'd been following the HOA corruption thread. The county prosecutor was pushing forward with criminal charges, document fraud, abuse of position, and financial misconduct. 3 felonies, multiple misdemeanors. Word spread through Rosefield like a firecracker in a birdhouse. Residents who once whispered about Karen in fear now openly mocked her. One neighbor even put up a Halloween display featuring a skeleton bride being arrested by lawn flamingos dressed as cops. Another made t-shirts. I survived the lake wedding 2025. And Charles, the groom who vanished mid-ceremony, filed a lawsuit of his own, claiming reputational damage and intentional deception. According to his lawyer, he didn't know the venue was stolen property until he saw the sheriff cuffing his cousin next to a tipped-over chocolate fountain. Meanwhile, the HOA itself was undergoing a full overhaul. Frank told me they hired an independent auditor to dig through past fines, board decisions, and budget allocations. A few of Karen's pet projects had bled money into side accounts that no one had authorized. There was talk of refunding improperly issued fees to residents and rewriting the HOA charter to prevent another Karen-style dictatorship. Then came the part I didn't expect. They invited me to consult, not as a member, obviously. I made it very clear I wanted nothing to do with the HOA's official business, but Frank said they needed someone outside the system to help them understand how it all went so wrong and how to keep things transparent going forward. I agreed. I wasn't interested in power. I just wanted to make damn sure no one else ever tried to repurpose my backyard for a Roman wedding fantasy again. Besides, it was oddly satisfying to sit in on one of their meetings, sipping iced tea while half the board members blushed and mumbled thanks. Karen didn't show up, of course. Rumor was she'd moved in with her sister across the state line, pending trial. Someone said she was considering writing a memoir. I hoped the title would be How to Ruin Your Life with a Folding Chair and a Permit Form. 6 months later, the lake was still mine, still private, and finally peaceful again. It was early May. The sun was warm, the trees were greening up, and the frogs were back in force, croaking like drunk tenors every evening around sunset. I'd finally rebuilt the dock after it was half destroyed by Karen's vendors and the wedding guests who apparently thought it doubled as a dance floor. The arch had been removed. The fake wrought iron gate was scrapped. Even the tire tracks had faded from the soil. What remained was serenity, and maybe just a trace of smug satisfaction. I'd made a few upgrades, a new grill, a slightly over-engineered fire pit, and a camera system with night vision and AI threat detection, because if another Karen came near my property line, I wanted NASA-level warning systems. That weekend, I invited a few friends over for a cookout. No champagne towers, no tent rentals, no emotional landmark speeches. Just burgers, cornhole, a cooler full of beer, and a playlist that didn't feature a single Ed Sheeran song. As the sun dipped low, a few neighbors from Rosefield strolled over. Not across my land, mind you, but on invitation through the gate I'd unlocked myself. Frank brought a case of microbrew. That quiet couple from the far end of the subdivision came with their teen daughter who'd helped run the TikTok account during the scandal. They called it Lake Justice. It had 500,000 followers now. We sat around the fire, trading stories, laughing about the chaos that once unfolded just a few feet from where Rocket now slept peacefully under my chair. Someone brought up the arrest again. Someone else imitated Karen's meltdown voice. "You're desecrating my day." I may have snorted beer out my nose. Around 9, a soft breeze came off the water. Fireflies danced over the grass. The HOA folks, relaxed for once, shared their plans for board reforms. Term limits, public votes, budget transparency. I told them I'd believe it when I saw it, but I meant it with warmth. They'd been through hell too, even if most of them only realized it too late. One of the teenagers pulled out their phone and asked if we could film a follow-up video for the channel. "What's the title?" I asked. She grinned. "The lake is still mine." So we filmed. A quick pan of the fire pit, the people, the peaceful dock. I held up a beer to the camera. No arrests this time. No fake maps, just good neighbors and real property lines. Cheers followed. Even Rocket barked on cue. Later that night, after everyone left, I sat out by the lake alone. No drama, no lawsuits, just the crackle of embers and the hum of cicadas. I raised my bottle to the water, to quiet victories. And this time, nobody screamed.